Hello, everyone. Dave Blum here. I have just gone live. For anybody who is on, please do introduce yourself in the group chat on the right side. I'm not expecting anyone until right on the bottom of the hour, but I am here and I'll just continue to talk and wave until people come on. You can see I'm in my lovely home here in Santa Rosa, California. Beautiful backdrop. And who knows what's behind it. There actually, if you look up above, you can see a little treasure chest. We're starting right at 6:30. Anybody who's coming on, I'll repeat this again and again, but please do introduce yourself in the group chat box on the right. We'll just wait. We're going to be talking about openers, closers, and transitions today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, kind of like an extended educational speech. If anyone is having any technical difficulties, if you just see me talking and you can't hear me, again, please ping me. But I won't expect anyone on until right at the bottom of the hour. We'll see how it goes. Dave Blum here. Usually I want to say the name of my company when I'm doing a webinar, but today it's just Dave Blum Club 182. So we're just going to wait until the bottom of the hour, until everyone comes, and we can begin this live webinar.
I don't know what that means. It says like create channel to chat. So if people aren't logging,
my technical consultant just informed me that the group chat requires some other kind of rigmarole in order for you to actually chat. You have to add a channel or something a little bit crazy. So it's possible that the group chat will not be working, in which case I'm going to go on faith that you can all hear me, and we'll just go from there.
That might be an option.
I'm going to actually put a little message in the chat as well. So I've just added my name to the chat, but I'm not sure that anyone else is able to get through or if I'm able to read your chat. Such are the vagaries of this kind of program. What we're using today is a Google Hangouts on Air, which is a interesting program that Google runs via YouTube. Nice thing about it is that it's free and it puts your program directly onto YouTube, which is kind of nice. However, I had not actually tested it, the chat part of it, and it does not seem like it's going to be a particularly useful tool today. So I'm just going to assume that you can all hear me, and when I start the webinar right at 6:30, you'll be there or you won't be there. It's kind of a trip, but that's what you get when you're trying to do the bootstrapping kind of webinar. But still, it's a good experience, and if anyone wants to learn how to use this particular platform, I'd be happy to teach you. It's not difficult at all, and it is, of course, the price is right. Some of the other programs like GoToWebinar, gosh, I can't even remember. There's a whole bunch of different types of programs, many of which cost quite a bit of money. Zoom is a pretty good one. Zoom is you use it a little bit more when you're doing one-on-one interviews and chats, or just a small group where you've got everybody wants to participate. Where for a webinar, I like to use this one because it's more of a one-way program. You know, I talk, you listen, you don't fall asleep, and so on. In any case, we're My assistant, Donica, tells me that thumbs up, she can hear me, and that we're live and everything is going well. So that's great. We're going to start in about a minute with the webinar. I think we're going to have about 10 people. We might have a few more. It's not a huge one. I am going to save it, though. When we're done, I will share a link to our entire group with the link if they want to come check on. But we should be going for about half an hour, I think, today. Shouldn't be longer than that, unless, of course, you have a lot of questions. It is 6:30, and since I am not receiving any chat comments, I'm going to just go ahead and jump into it. Anybody who comes in a little bit later will have to just get up to speed. All right, fantastic. Let's go to the webinar and begin. Today's speech is called Become a Speech Superhero with Openers, Closers, and Transitions. Hopefully you can all see my slides, which I am sharing right now. And in traditional fashion, good evening, fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, and fellow speech superheroes. My name is Dave Blum, but today you can call me Toastman if you like. I will be your superhero guide as we discuss 3 key speech writing tools: openers, closers, and transitions. Please note the chat box to your right. It's there. You can certainly chat amongst each other. Also note that there tends to be a bit of delay between my words and the slides. It could be as much as 20 seconds, so I'll try to accommodate for that and move things a little bit slower. Let's start things off with a short memory test. Please listen to the following list of words without writing them down. I repeat, don't write them down. It's a memory test, not a note-taking quiz. So put your pen down. Ready? Okay, here we go. Dream, sleep, night, mattress, snooze, sheet, nod, tired, night, artichoke, insomnia, blanket, night, alarm, nap. Now take a piece of paper and write down as many words as you can remember. Okay, go. You've got about 40 seconds. Do a countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right. And stop. Now be assured, I'm not interested in finding out how you performed on the test. There will be no grades. I would, however, like to ask you this. Did you recall the word dream and pillow? Go ahead in your chat box if you like, because I believe that you can probably share with each other. Go ahead and write yes or no in the chat box. Did you recall the words dream and pillow? If you did, this is because of the principle of primacy and recency. This means people recall the first and last thing in a series. The first word was dream, the last word was pillow. And we remember the opener and the closer, and this is true for speeches as well. We remember the intro, we remember the conclusion. As for what's in the middle, not so much. If you want to have a real impact with your speeches and leave people with something to remember, something to act on, you have to bang the opening and bang the conclusion. Precisely because of this principle of primacy and recency. You can completely botch the middle of your speech, but if you nail the beginning and the ending, people will still walk away saying, "Wow, Martha, great speech." You get the idea. Before we move on, let me ask you one more question about that list. When I read it, did you recall the word artichoke? Go ahead and write yes or no in the chat box. Artichoke. If you did, it speaks to another memory principle, which is called the surprise effect. People remember things that are novel or different. Artichoke was different from all the other sleep-related words in the list. It stood out. And that is true for speeches as well. Keep the surprise effect in mind. We'll return to it again when we discuss openers and introductions. And finally, one more thing before we move on from this memory test. Did you hear me say the word night in the list? You can go ahead and write yes or no in the box for each other. Did you hear me say the word night? In fact, I repeated night 3 times. This is called the repetition effect. People remember things that are repeated. Now, I'll touch on this again when we're talking about conclusions. Here are my hopes for today's session. By the end of this webinar, you will be able to write speech openers that grab your audience's attention. You'll be able to create conclusions that wrap things up and make an impact. And you'll be able to craft transitions from point to point that make your speeches flow. I included point number 3 because transitions are often neglected, both in writing and speaking. It's like kind of like breathing, if you think about it. You know, your inhale obviously counts and your exhale counts. But if your arteries and your blood vessels and your breathing passages are all blocked, the oxygen won't go anywhere. It won't reach your extremities. Smooth transitions in a speech allow everything to flow. They get you from the intro to the conclusion without any unnecessary interference. And that's why we're going to talk about those today as well. Let's jump now into point number 1, which is openings. If you think back to the memory test at the beginning of this presentation, did it grab your attention? Did it help introduce the topic? Did it establish rapport? And did it take only a few minutes? For the typical 5 to 7 minute Toastmaster speech, you've got about 360 to 400 seconds to work with. That means your opener can't be more than 18 to 36 seconds long or something like that, 20 to 40 seconds on average. It's a pretty short period of time. The criteria for a successful opening are that you need to, number 1, get the attention of the audience. A listener's attention needs to be refocused away from any distractions and toward the speaker, which is you. You got to transition them from their daily life of distractions and cell phones, dramatics, and bring them to the speaker. And so you need a strong opening that gets their attention. A good beginning draws the audience's attention to the speaker in the presentation. Number 2, you need to introduce the topic. The beginning of a speech should indicate what the speaker will be talking about and why the audience should be interested. When listeners understand the topic and how they will benefit from listening to a speech, they will immediately pay closer attention. And number 3, you need to establish rapport. The audience will be more receptive to the speaker and the message if the speaker appears friendly, appears interested in them, and shows personal interest in the subject. And there's a lot of effective ways to do this, obviously. You can to establish rapport. You can smile, you can show enthusiasm, you can make eye contact, and lots more. Actually, I'm going to not go on to this next one. We're going to stay here for a second. Having a great opener, it's not just helpful for your audience, it also helps you, the speaker, as well. For example, if you have a great opener, it can calm your nerves. It can provide clarity of mind. When you know you've got a great opener, it's kind of relaxing, isn't it? You feel like, I've got this, and everything flows from there. What follows now are 7 openers that hopefully will grab the attention of your audience and help you organize your speech. Starting with number 1, state the importance of your topic. I did this at the beginning, or at least I tried to do this at the beginning, when I said, quote, if you want to have a real impact with your speeches and leave people something to remember, something to act on, you have to bang the opening and the conclusion. That's stating the importance of the topic. I probably could have stated it even more important. If you don't have a strong opening, you'll put people to sleep and they'll hate you. Well, I hope not. But you could lose some credibility. So you want to state the importance of your topic. Here's another example. If you were giving a speech about sunburn, speaker might begin by saying, a golden tan may be glamorous, but overexposure to the sun can age your skin prematurely and can cause skin cancer. Thus, it's important to protect yourself from the harmful rays of the sun. Okay, there's the importance of the topic. If you don't do this, all sorts of bad things happen. Sounds like it might be pretty important to your listeners to pay attention. Number 2, make a startling statement. Smoking kills. More Americans die each year from smoking than were killed in battle during World War II and Vietnam together. There's the surprise effect for you as well, which we were talking about earlier, like when you heard the word artichoke in that memory test. Sometimes you just need to shock people. You need to startle them, to hook their attention. And it can be done with a statistic like this, or just some startling turn of phrase. Number 3, arouse suspense or curiosity. I like this one a lot. You use a series of statements related to the topic that would pique your listeners' interest. For example, I gave a speech recently when I brought out a treasure chest, pretended to open it up, didn't open it up, and asked people what they thought might be inside. I wanted to arouse people's curiosity and create some suspense. Or how about when Donica started his speech by asking, what do you do in the shower? Good one. Or Greg Carter, he introduced a speech with his 3 friends, the Marlboro Man, Ronald McDonald and Jose Cuervo, and you're wondering, what do they have to do with each other? Where is the speaker going with this? And that arouses suspense and curiosity. Your interest is piqued. Number 4, tell a story or an anecdote. You could just start a speech, today I'm going to talk about blah, blah, blah. Or you can say, my brother and I went hunting last week in the woods behind my house. And you lean in and say, well, tell me more about this. What happened behind your house with your brother in the woods? And it could be any story you like. Amusing tales, dramatic stories, anecdotes, all of those get your audience involved. And it's one of the least employed techniques. There's no reason not to just start right out with a story. You don't even have to say, and now I'm going to tell a story. Let me tell you a story. You don't need to do that. You can just stand up there and just say, my brother and I went hunting last week, and just launch into the story. You probably remember Greg's speech just the other day for the international competition when he started with how he was looking at an MRI machine. In fact, in one of his incarnations, he was actually inside the MRI machine thinking about his life. And that story grabbed your attention. It sure grabbed me. Remember to keep the story or anecdote relevant to the main point of the speech and personalize it whenever possible. Let's go on. Number 5, ask a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question you ask without expecting an answer. Questions are great for making the audience think about an answer, and thus they think about your topic. For example, if you had a speech about first aid, you could begin by asking, do you know what to do if your child begins to choke? You're not really expecting everybody to raise their hand and say, yes, I do. You're asking a question that doesn't really have an immediate answer, but it makes people think, do I know what to do if my child begins to choke? It's a rhetorical question, and it's a good one. It doesn't have to even be rhetorical, but starting with a question is a great way to begin a speech. Number 6, begin with a quotation, which can add authority to your speech. It can amuse the audience. It can dramatize a speech point. Quotations are a good way. I don't know if they really grab the attention the way that some of the other ones do, but still, it is a perfectly valid way to start a speech. For example, a speech on leadership could begin, Dwight D. Eisenhower, 34th President of the United States, once said, "You do not lead people by hitting them over the head. That's assault, not leadership." Kind of grabs you, huh? Using a quotation is an easy and effective way to attract attention. Remember to keep quotes short and related directly to the speech topic. And some sources of quotations could be friends, family, coworkers, internet, books, magazines, television, radio programs. Kind of endless. And of course, your quote could just be from the greatest authority himself, Roy Ingham. I don't know if Roy's on this. I'm smiling to you, Roy, right now. Number 7, reference the occasion. Reference occasion, which allows the speaker to recognize an unusual or important event and establish a common interest with the audience. Speeches aren't given in a vacuum. Quite often, you're speaking for a reason on a particular occasion, and you better reference it. For example, if you were giving a speech at the opening of a new school, it might go like this. Ladies and gentlemen, 5 years ago, we were told by our town council that we had no money to build a new elementary school. We were told that our children had to continue attending a 75-year-old school that only had 4 classrooms. Today, we stand before our brand new elementary school, a place where the children of this growing community will be educated for years to come. We're proud that the members of this community worked together to accomplish what some said could not be done. It references the occasion. The Gettysburg Address, 20 years ago, our nation. So reference the occasion, if that is appropriate, if it's a special occasion that needs to be noted. A few other techniques are humor, audience participation, or a demonstration. You could tell a joke. You could say to people, raise your hand if you've ever been on a scavenger hunt. I do that all the time. That raising of the hand gets audience participation. You can demonstrate the right way to use a microphone like Don Franceschi did on a speech not long ago. Whatever technique you choose, ensure it's relevant to the topic, to the audience, and to the occasion. But all of these are great. What you don't want to do is lose people in the first 10 seconds and then it's all over. And actually, before we close out the openers, I'm going to point out that just as there are positive opening techniques to practice and keep in mind, it's also important to avoid techniques that will distract your audience. And here are 3 no-nos. Number 1, try to avoid acknowledging the amount of preparation that you put into this speech. The audience does not need to know how much time a speaker has prepared for a speech he or she is giving. Unless the amount of time specifically pertains to the speech, it should not be addressed. If a speaker has spent little time preparing and states that fact, the speaker is going to invalidate their expertise with the audience and lose that authoritative voice. For example, you probably don't want to say, "Thank you all for coming. I haven't really had a chance to prepare." You've lost them. You've already lost them. Nor do you want to say, "I've been preparing this speech for months." It's not relevant. You don't need to acknowledge that. Number two, avoid being dull and boring. Seems kind of obvious, but still. Listeners need to be captivated, informed, inspired, and motivated. A speaker hopes to accomplish this from the beginning of the speech. Stay away from a bland beginning like, "Today my speech is about the breakthrough of medicine." Boring. Or, "Before I begin, let's do a little housekeeping. The bathroom is down the hall, the water fountain is over there, blah, blah, blah." You should have done that before. Put it on a handout, whatever it is. You don't need to lose your precious 7 to 10 seconds doing housekeeping. And finally, avoid delaying mention of the topic. Some speakers think that delaying mention of the topic creates anticipation and arouses curiosity, and sometimes it works. I saw Donica do it recently, and it worked. But in general, it's not true. If the audience does not know the subject matter and the purpose of the speaker's message, they're going to lose focus. So an example might be something like this. "You have all come to this conference in anticipation of delving deeper into the theme of education. The title of my speech is," well, we'll get to that in a few moments. Oh my God, they're going to scream. "We want to know the title of your speech. Don't lure us." It doesn't really create anticipation. It just creates frustration. In conclusion, a dynamic beginning is essential for successful speech. Take the extra time to create an exciting, imaginative beginning that will grab your listener's attention and keep it focused on you. First impressions can be lasting impressions. Ensure the first impression is positive by using some of the techniques that we've discussed so far. Let's move along. Now, I think we're going to go right on to transitions. Transition is a word or phrase that connects one idea to another. This connection can occur within a paragraph or between paragraphs. Transitions are used to show how sentences or paragraphs are related to each other and how they relate to the overall theme of the paper or of the speech. So let's face it, transitions are hard. I remember in high school, I brought all of my papers to my dad to read, and I would write my latest English essay. I'd bring it down the hall to the den where my dad, a journalist, would be sitting at his desk waiting for me. And after reviewing my work, he'd send it back to me covered in red ink with the words, "Better transitions," scrawled in big letters. And I'd slink back down the long hallway to my room, working hard to improve my transitions, and I'd bring it back to him, and I'd get more red ink, and more red ink, and more red ink, and this went on for 4 years. But I got better at transitions, and they really serve me. They really serve me now. I'm a transition master. That's my new superhero name. Transition man. Beginning writers and speakers tend to neglect or underuse transitions. They write a section of their speech, and then another, and each section stands alone, but they don't connect. Speech doesn't flow. It's like creating sections of railroad track and not tying them together. What happens? The train runs off the rail, or at least it gets stuck on one section of rail and it can't continue. And you don't have the Transcontinental Railway. You have the train that doesn't leave Sacramento. So we're going to talk a little bit about different types of transitions. And I'm going to share with you 6 tried and true transitions that I use all the time that you can use in your next speech. Starting with number 1, cause and effect. Cause and effect includes such words as consequently, therefore, accordingly, as a result, because, for this reason, hence, and thus. An example might be something like this. Before I joined Toastmasters, I was terrified of public speaking. Thinking about it made my knees knock, my stomach tighten, my forehead sweat. For this reason, or therefore, or consequently, I avoided joining Toastmasters for months. So you see how this works, cause and effect. Because of this, that happened. Because of this, that happened. I did this, therefore, consequently, something else, some effect happened. And this can be very effective, and it's a great transition. Because the thing to remember about transitions is you always have one foot in your last paragraph and one foot in your new paragraph, and you want to tie them together. Second transition that I like a lot has to do with sequence. And you have words like the ones you see here. Furthermore, in addition, moreover, first, second, and third, finally, again, also, and besides, further, in the first place, in the last place, likewise, next, and so on. It has to do with sequence. You use this transition when you have speech points that happen in order. For example, let's say your speech continues. Standing up there at the lectern, I thought I was going to die. Everyone was looking at me. I was all choked up. Moreover, or furthermore, or in addition, I couldn't remember my speech. First, I looked at my notes. Second, I took a deep breath. And third, I looked out at the crowd and imagined everyone wearing underwear. That's what I think. In other words, when you're using sequence, first this, then that happened, then that happened, then that happened. In addition, that happened. Moreover, that happened, and so on. So it's a sequence of things. But if you're going to be talking about this happened, then that happened, then that happened, you want to have transitions. You want to have a sequence. Number 3 is comparison or contrast. This includes such words as similarly, also in the same way, likewise, although at the same time. And then you've got contrast, like but, conversely, even so, however, in contrast, nevertheless, nonetheless, and so on. You use this transition when you have speech points that are either really similar or really different. For example, after my speech introduction, I froze like a deer in the headlights. It was like I was lost in the wilderness without matches or compass. But then I looked in the audience and saw that Donica was smiling and beaming me support. In the same way, Marie, Leslie, and Nora were also sending me good vibes. And at the same time, Roy and Don were giving me thumbs up. Conversely, or in contrast, Brooke and our cheat seemed to be falling asleep. Nevertheless, I soldiered on. In other words, this was this way, that was just the same or different. So you want to build on one paragraph by indicating that something is similar or that something is different. And this one is so easy to use, and it is so powerful because human beings like contrast. There's a reason that when you see weight reduction ads, there's a before and an after. People like contrast, and you want to represent that in your transitions to make it flow from one to the next. The next one is example. And this includes words like, for example, for instance, in fact, indeed, of course, specifically, that is, to illustrate. I think these are pretty, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You want to give an example, you want to have a transition. Blah, 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 blah. For example, I love different types of cheese. For instance, Gouda, Brie, camembert. Specifically, I like so-and-so. So you want to just give examples. I think that one's pretty clear. And number 5 is fairly similar. It's called for the purpose. For this reason, to this end, with this object in mind. So you use this transition when you have a point that leads to a resulting action, intention, or purpose. For example, continue with my speech. In spite of my early failures in public speaking, I knew I wanted to be better. In fact, I wanted to win next year's district conference. For this reason, could also be for this purpose or to this end. For this reason, I began working with a mentor. I stayed up late at night watching speeches on YouTube. To this end, I started listening to every webinar I could find. In short, after deciding to do this, I did that. You've got a purpose. And you want to have a transition that indicates that you were doing something, and then for a particular reason or purpose, you started doing something else. The next one is time or location, and there are too many here for me to read, but they all have to do with time or location. You often use this transition when you're telling a story and need to move it along in terms of time or place. For instance, I worked on my speech primarily at the library. I had a favorite table right near the reference librarian's desk. Beyond my table was the bathrooms, and farther on was the children's section. After a while, a pretty girl sat down at the table next to me. I continued working, head down. In the meantime, the girl had taken out a Toastmasters Competent Communicator Handbook. It was marriage made in heaven. In other words, I was doing this at this place, then I did that, here or there, at this time, or at that time, etc. I was doing this something in time, I was doing something in place, and that kind of word moved things along. In conclusion, about transitions, your audience will love you if you do use them. A well-placed transition is golden. Use them well, and your speech will flow like it's never flowed before. And now, finally, in conclusion, we're going to move on to my final point of the day, which is conclusions. And the criteria for successful conclusions are achieve a sense of closure, make an impact, and they should only take 5 to 10% of the entire speech time, much like the intro. A conclusion is vital to the success of any speech. All too often, an otherwise excellent speech just peters out because of a poor closing. Remember, according to the principle of recency, which I talked about earlier, people remember the last thing they hear more than any other part of your speech. If you want people to remember and be favorably impressed with your presentation, you must bring your speech to the finish line, positively and forcefully. Bring it home. And there are 3 criteria. Let me just expand these a little bit further. When you achieve a sense of closure, that means that an effective closing signals to the audience that your speech is ending and reminds them to pay attention to your final words. And some common phrases that tell listeners you'll be ending your speech and leading them to closure are, in conclusion, let me end by saying, in summary, or to sum up. Okay, between you and me, they're a little bit trite. They're kind of tropes, but they do work in a pinch. And if you're given a table topic and you say, in conclusion, it's more than most people are doing. And if you do it in a speech, there's nothing wrong with it, especially at the beginning, to just say, in summary, or in conclusion, let me end by saying. And it's great. It definitely gives a sense of closure, which is nice. You want to make an impact? A good ending makes a lasting impression on your audience. People really do remember the last thing they hear the longest. After a few weeks, your listeners may have forgotten most of your speech. However, they will remember the last words you said to them and how they felt after hearing those words. If you deliver the ending in a striking, forceful, or meaningful way. It's pretty cool. And just like the intro, you want to take less than 10% of the entire speech time. Let's say you're given a 10-minute speech, you got 30 to 60 seconds to wrap it up. Now, there are some great conclusions. I'm going to share them with you. And if you apply them with the criteria above, they really will create a lasting and vivid impression, which is what you're going for. And let's jump into the 6 killer closing techniques that will make you a speech superhero. Number 1. Okay, this looks familiar. Use a quotation. Used properly, a quotation can add authority to your closing. It can amuse your listeners. It can dramatize your speech points. Whatever quote you choose, keep it short and related directly to your speech topic. So here's an example. A presentation about innovation could close with George Bernard Shaw's words, "Some men see things as they are and ask why. I dare to dream of things that never were and ask, why not?" It's a good quote, but you didn't know it was from George Bernard Shaw. Sounds like it should be something from Simon Sinek. So it's a good one. You can end a speech with a short story or anecdote. And as you can see, these closings are very similar to the openings. You can end with a short story. Good story can make a memorable closing. It can be inspirational or funny, but it should be short, developed quickly, and related to reinforce your message. Number 3, you can call for action. I think that a lot of speeches, particularly if your speech was intended to persuade or urge your listeners to take some kind of action, your closing statement should clearly explain what that action is that they should take. For example, you could finish a speech about drug abuse prevention by saying something like this: "Educating our young people about drugs begins with you. After you leave here tonight, I urge you to go home and talk to your children. Tell them you love them and are concerned for them. Talk to them about drugs." Good call to action. I enjoy it actually when I'm giving a speech. I was just saying, based on what you heard today, I urge you to go out and do this, or I invite you to go out and do that. It's nice. It gives people something to do, makes it so that it's not just a speech that dies on the vine, but they actually have action steps. And I know a lot of speakers will actually have people write them down, find a partner, share them with somebody else, just so that you have accountability and it happens. Closing technique number 4, you can ask a rhetorical question, just as we talked about before. You can end your speech by asking one question, a series of questions, and then people will think about an answer and hopefully think about your speech. For example, you could ask, can we afford to do this? I ask, can we afford not to? Not bad. Number 5, refer to the beginning of the speech. It's interesting. This is what is often referred to as a callback. There are other terms as well. But you tie your closing words to the beginning of your speech to reinforce your message. And it could be words, or it could be a prop, or anything you like that refers back to the beginning of the speech. This might look like something like this. I began my remarks today by reviewing the challenges our company must confront if we are to continue to be successful. I believe these challenges provide opportunities for each of us to learn and grow as individuals. Let's not be afraid of these challenges. Let's welcome them as opportunities and move forward. Sounds a bit stodgy, but the idea is I began my remarks by so-and-so. So we refer back to the beginning. As you may recall, you Club 182 people, Donica gave a speech recently which began with, "What do you do in the shower?" I ask myself questions. And then she concluded, "Do you remember those questions I asked in the shower?" It was nice. In that speech I started with opening my treasure chest, I brought the treasure chest back out at the end as a callback. Greg Carter concluded his speech recently, his My Three Friends speech, my Three Friends speech with the line, "Be careful who you call your friends." Callbacks are really great. They're not employed enough. Sometimes there are some people who think they're a little bit trite. I still think they're really powerful. And when we were at the international conference, almost everybody was using a callback of some kind. So think about it the next time you're giving a speech. How can you end it by referring back to the way you began it? It's called bookending, and it gives a speech a nice round sense of completion. Number 6, summarize your main points. Repetition does reinforce your message. There's nothing wrong with ending your speech with a summary that repeats the points presented in the body of the speech, particularly if you're doing a professional speech. As we learned in the memory test earlier, repetition reinforces your message, night, 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 night from the list, and it enhances your audience's learning. An example might be, remember, please, the 3 keys to making this new program work: understanding, commitment, and teamwork. Only when we all know the program, commit to it, and work together will we achieve our goal. So summarize your main points. There's nothing wrong with it. Let me give you a few final tips about conclusions. Memorize your conclusion. A memorized, polished ending enables you to end confidently and adds impact to your speech. It also means that you are looking at your audience while you're giving it and you're bringing it home. So memorize your conclusion and ditch the notes. Number 2, end on time. Too many speeches are ruined because the speaker goes far beyond the allotted time. And by ending on time with a dynamic conclusion, you leave your audience with a favorable image, and the opposite is true. If you go on and on beyond the time, all the people are going to remember is that speech went on forever, or that speech went over time. That person was disqualified at a contest, and you forget everything else. So end it on time. It's a discipline that's worth practicing. And then this one's interesting. Refrain from adding new points. What this means is that occasionally you may forget to mention a point in the body of your speech. Bringing it up in the conclusion of your speech detracts from the effectiveness of the conclusion, and it confuses the audience. You don't want to say, in summary, I want to leave you with these 3 main points. Oh, wait, make that 4 main points. It drives people crazy. It kind of reminds me of the Monty Python, the Spanish Inquisition sketch. We have 3 main tools of torture, 4 main tools for torture, and so on. It's crazy. So don't bring up any new points. Just end your speech the way that you practice it, or it'll just drive people nuts. In conclusion, let's finish with a quotation from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Great is the art of beginning, but greater is the art of ending. Pretty much sums it up. All too often, an otherwise excellent speech loses its effectiveness and becomes because of a mediocre closing. And don't let this happen to you. You put too much work into creating and presenting your speech. Make a lasting impact. Use some of these methods presented today to conclude your speech positively and to conclude it forcefully. Now, I was going to ask for some questions, and if we had our chat box working beautifully, I would take your questions right now. But since I'm all going to see you in a couple weeks on Monday night, you can just bring them to me, or feel free to email me with any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. And I am running a little bit late, so we can just move right along to the wrap-up. And I think I'm going to leave you with a call to action. Why not, right? So let's do a call to action. I challenge you. I challenge you to use an opener and a closer from today's webinar in your next speech. To stretch yourself, to use one that you've never used before. I see that actually I'm getting a little low-tech question. can we get a copy of the slides of the presentation? And the answer is yes. I'd be happy to send you a copy of the slides. I've actually got it on a PDF, so I can just send you a PDF, or I can send you the slides. So back to my challenge. I challenge you to use openers and closers, stretch yourself, use ones you've never used before. And on your next speech, after that, try a different opener and a different closer, and so on. Make sure you ask your evaluator and your mentor, if you have one, to pay attention to your openers, your intros, and your closers, your conclusions, for impact and effectiveness. Try a different one each speech for the next 3 speeches and expand your repertoire. And similarly, did you see that transition? Similarly, try to use a variety of appropriate transitions in your next speech and ask your evaluator to pay attention to them as well. I love these 2 final quotations. I think they're pretty cool. They may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And this one from D.H. Lawrence. Be still when you have nothing to say. When genuine passion moves you, say what you've got to say and say it hot. My hope today is that after listening to this session, you can now write speech openers that grab your audience's attention. You can create conclusions that wrap things up and make an impact. That you can craft transitions from point to point that make your speeches flow. You are speech superheroes, my friends, to infinity and beyond. Thank you very much. Good. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the chat. I understand that it's working. Donica, my tech person, are there any questions in chat? She could be my alternate chat person. Yeah, we'll see. So if you guys want to stay on and ask some questions, I should be able to get access to the chat and answer any questions. Otherwise, as mentioned earlier, I can definitely, in fact, probably what I'll do is I'll take this PDF and I will send it out to all of the listeners so that you have it. If you found it useful, I'd love to know. If you didn't find it useful, that's okay. But it's fun to put this together. Great thing about doing these educational sessions is that you actually get a chance to learn about things. I didn't know that there were 6 or 7 different types of transitions, for example. There are no questions, apparently. All right. Then I'm going to hop off. I've kept you going for a little bit longer than the 30 minutes I expected, but that's exciting. You know how it is when you're rambling and transitioning. I'm going to pop back to me so you can all see me and so I can say good night to everyone. Any other further questions from my technical assistant? Okay. Then, thank you so much for attending, for helping me to get through this particular Pathways project, which I would have done anyway, because this is content that we all need as we try and work on our speeches. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to let me know by email or text your impressions of this and anything that I could be doing better for the next one. Thank you very much. I'm going to sign off. Have a great evening and see you in a couple of weeks. Happy Labor Day. Bye-bye.